Perfect. Thanks very much, Mark. And look, and it's great to follow on from Arena as well. I mean, investing, in climate impact funds is making a huge difference. And I've worked for IBM for quite a while in our consulting business, and without doubt, we're working on some of the most fantastic projects around. I mean, one of which is something called Fast Infra, which does sort of flow on really quite nicely from Arena's presentation. So Fast Infra stands for Finance to Accelerate Sustainable Transition. So really it was an initiative born out of conversations with the World Bank, IFC, HSBC, CPI, and it's all around fundamentally targeting the huge investment gap in sustainable infrastructure finance. So it's around about 100 trillion of infrastructure spend that's needed through to 2030. But the issue really is it's about a 3.9 trillion gap each year through to 2030. So if you can imagine, you have all of these project developers around the world looking for funding from people like Arena, but actually these are major solar farms, wind farms, sustainable investments in developing parts of the world. And the ability to put those investment cases together and work with a really, really complex set of stakeholders, incredibly complicated process that goes through the initial sort of setup of the investment case through to the due diligence that financiers would need to do, working with verifiers and third parties on those really, really complicated projects. It could be nuclear, it could be, a sewage farm, it could be anything really. And actually going through that investor matching into building and constructing these projects and then monitoring them as well to make sure that the data flow from these projects actually perform to spec and that people haven't fraudulently put in lower quality infrastructure. So it's a massive data issue really at its heart. And so we got involved in this. We were in some conversations with UN, actually UN Habitat actually, so there is a kind of connection. And we got into conversations with HSBC and we started to talk about this being fundamentally an industry data platform problem. And some of the, my role really has been leading a blockchain practice here in the UK for IBM. And we rarely talk about technology. We don't go into conversations with, let's talk to you about blockchain. This is a fantastic attribute of blockchain. It doesn't really work like that. You get into these conversations at systemic, industry level or business level problems and challenges. And so those challenges tend to fall into different categories in blockchain: tokenization, identity, provenance, supply chain type problems. And you can break it down, but fundamentally, we had this huge challenge around how to deepen the asset class, improve the liquidity of the asset class, and really sort of drive the flow of investment into these projects with a very, very real target and a date by which you have to hit this. So we launched into this with a view to really announcing something at COP26. And my personal view is most blockchain projects, because of the nature of building cognitive business networks and the complexity of the ecosystems, are incredibly hard to get off the ground. We have TradeLens for shipping, we have Ligon for bank guarantee. You can point to these things, but they're very, very hard because you're getting multiple parties and actors all having to work together. And so, we got into this, this sort of dialogue about how do we get this moving. And so I think my big takeaway is you do need somebody who is very, very passionate, very, very visible, and very, very senior to get this to work. So fortunately, in this case, we had Noel Quinn, who's the chief executive of HSBC. So he announced that this was going to be absolutely at the top of his priority list. It was effectively going to be a legacy thing, but he didn't want this to be an HSBC initiative. If it was an HSBC initiative, nobody would come. It has to be an industry initiative. but he would use his power to convene effectively a consortia. And we have become the technology partner to make this real. So we've built a clickable prototype. We're in the middle of sort of building this MVP, so we're going from COP26 to COP27, where we'll be able to say, this is a real project on real technology, and that we will be looking for other banks, other investors, other people to come on board. And some of these organizations, I think HSBC's target is to invest 750 billion to $1 trillion by 2030 in these projects. But because of the data issues, confidentiality, fragmentation, complexity of actors in the process, that flow is just not there. And the asset class is not liquid. And so they're working on a label, so projects can secure a label, put that into their documentation. Bankers have more confidence in that project being sustainable. And so the whole process will speed up. And hopefully, in a few years' time, we'll make a huge difference to funding of these really important projects.
Right. Can I have a... Hold your clap a minute. Let's get a couple of questions out. Yeah, covered some complex territory there, didn't you?
Yep, sorry.
And the ambition of it is huge, and I guess it will prove itself when it's not just HSBC, but more other banks doing, right?
Yes.
But they have to prove the use case to the banks to show that there's a greater good beyond it, which I'm sure is their ambition. The way you explain it, it's like 100 trillion of infrastructure. It doesn't all have to be on brand spanking new innovation, right? The next generation, you mentioned sewage plants and motorways.
Yeah, absolutely.
They have to be newer, better ones to replace the ones that are broken. And there might be another cycle in 20 years to update that one. But have you got a comment on how global this could be? It seems to me the partners feel quite global in their ambition.
Very much so.
Yeah. A sewage plant that gets commissioned in Cambridgeshire or whatever, and the data is collected and its performance becomes a real data point for the next one getting built outside of Seoul or something like that, right?
Yes.
It should be such a big data set that everyone should be learning and innovating in real time a bit.
Well, that's right. And I think there is this concept of having value-added services, almost like a marketplace of apps that can plug into this data platform so that people can get value, whether you're a constructor, financier. The whole concept comes down to effectively building a digital twin of the development project,
right?
So that people could reuse the data and get value from it.
That was popped into my head in something Jesus was saying at the start, right? They're building in the university some of these use cases.
Yep.
Let's call it a sewage plant. It could be twinned, and then it becomes visible to all these other cities looking at their next sewage plant and learning in real time. Yep. Right, absolutely fascinating, Robert. Now we can clap. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Right.